Good morning. While everyone's coming in, we'll get started in just a few minutes. Good morning, everyone. It's 9:01, so we are going to get started. My name is Kirsten Russell, and I'm the Vice President of Community Impact at the Community Foundation of Sarasota County. We are so glad to have all of you with us this morning on this crisp fall Sarasota day for our Community Voices session. We have a wonderful panel for you centering on diverse perspectives and thoughts that enrich our region. I think we will all be inspired as we learn more about how these individuals and their organizations give voice to those they serve through unique mediums to highlight diversity in thought, perspectives, and opinions. Before we introduce our guests, just a few friendly Zoom reminders. I'm sure you're very familiar with these, but we're just going to give you these quick reminders. All of our guests are on mute and cannot see one another. You will see each panelist, and we'll be able to communicate with our team through chat or Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. Chat is open to anyone, and all questions and answers are public. Q&A is monitored by us and can be answered privately or shared with all guests. We will do our very best to answer any and all questions that you pose, but if there's anything that we're not able to answer because we run out of time, we will respond to those questions directly to you after the session. Please note that this session is also being recorded. Now I would like to introduce our moderator and board member and friend, Mercedes Solaire. Mercedes and her husband lead the efforts at Solmart Media, their audio, broadcast, and digital media company. She oversees editorial content, community outreach, advocacy, and marketing. Her extensive experience includes work with the State Department, as well as coaching leaders, executives, and diplomats. She is an award-winning media personality, broadcast journalist, and the co-author of a book, Dish and Tell. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mercedes Solaire to our virtual stage. Thank you, Mercedes.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you all of our panelists gathered here today and our audience. We're very excited to be sharing with you this morning. It's really a joy for me to now weave us into a conversation with three trailblazing women we're about to meet. They've been dedicating themselves to the betterment of our communities they represent. They've been building bridges, they've been collecting wisdom and listening to voices of their constituents, be it the importance of diversity and racial justice in the arts, the inclusion of LGBTQ+ groups into the mainstream society, or gathering ideas about how first we dream and then we build an outdoor public space that will truly serve all the people who come to this space for inspiration, for relaxation, for connection to nature and to each other. Now that's the fine work being done today by Michele de Verney Redwine of Suncoast Black Arts Collaborative, by Donna Hanley, Project Pride SRQ, and Jeannie Perales of the Bay Park Conservancy. Good morning to all of you. Welcome and thank you for sharing with us. Today, I'd like to start with each of you, please introducing yourselves and your organization for about 3 minutes, starting with you, Michele.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having this conversation, very important. And in fact, our focus is on community conversation. I am Michele Redwine, and I am the founder of Suncoast Black Arts Collaborative. We've had our 501c a little over a year, and excited to really be engaged within this community. Well, you want me to continue, Mercedes? That was just an introduction.
That's a great introduction. We're going to come back to you. Donna, if you could also introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Project SRQ. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mercedes. I am a board member with Project Pride SRQ, and I am the chair of the governance committee. Project Pride SRQ has been in existence since late 2019, so we're pretty new in the nonprofit world. Our focus is mainly on the LGBTQ plus population, but with a broader focus on integrating that community with the larger Sarasota Manatee community.
Thank you. And Jeannie?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. It's great to be in your company and to be able to share a little bit about the Bay Park Conservancy with all of the attendees this morning. I just realized that I'm missing an earring. So I'm
there you go.
You look fabulous.
Okay, a little icebreaker there. So I've been at the Bay Park Conservancy for all of 3 months. I spent the last decade at Selby Gardens, and before that I was at the Ringling Museum. Personally, I'm a Sarasota native. My kids are 4th generation, so I'm very happy to be working on this legacy project for our community. And just a little bit about the Bay Park Conservancy. It's been kind of, the seed was planted back in, I think, 2008 by a group of folks here in our community, Virginia Hanley and Michael Clobber and John Baxton, lots of people who are very engaged in building, strengthening our community. And then 2013, it kind of took a new form, and back in 2018, it became the Bay Park Conservancy. And the goal is to build a park where there is currently a parking lot kind of surrounding the Van Wezel. It's 53 acres, and building a park is definitely a team effort. So there's been a lot of community outreach over the years, which we'll get to in a little bit, but thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jeannie. So let's get into the nitty gritty of our conversation, because we promised each other we were going to be honest, transparent, and really let our voices ring out. I'm going to start with you, Michele, and you've been doing something really important in our community. You've been creating these spaces where racial justice is talked about, where arts diversity is talked about. And I know that hundreds of people have participated. I've participated, I've learned a lot. Please walk us through some of the truth that have been spoken in these conversations and that you can now take forward.
Wonderful. Absolutely. And our biggest event was actually last night. It was the first event where we had a true cross section of community, students, educational leaders, and faculty and staff. And that, I think, gave a deeper breadth to the conversation and stimulation. But what's actually happened from the very first panel, that was our 4th last night, is that the panelists, I think, are starting to realize that a public discussion and exchange of ideas and conversation is helping them to realize the work that they must undertake moving forward. And that's actually the overall, I think, success of the project. we are impacting, I think, a large portion of the community, including our underrepresented community. The organization works very hard in reaching them to sign on to our Zoom events and to attend the panel last night. And that's significant because diversity is about inclusion, and inclusion must be the full community coming together. We anticipate continuing in 2022, and we don't know what those conversations are going to be yet, but it's certainly going to be a collaborative voice of our students, our young people, as well as our leaders within the community. And the arts are changing. The arts are changing. I speak to the executive directors often. I speak to staff. I serve on a number of committees. And I'm hearing some good things about the employment of staffing, working on systemic issues so that these things become a part of the organizations. There's always a diversity goal. There has to be a diversity goal within any project that takes place. And that's the only way an organization is going to change. So
I really appreciate what you said about diversity, meaning inclusion, Michele, because a lot of times we operate in our own silos, right? We're in our own communities, and I'm Hispanic. So I operate in this world of Spanish speaking people. And when I attended your arts collaborative Zoom meetings, I saw a lot of African Americans in that meeting, but not a lot of diversity as far as people coming in together and talking to each other. And I know, Donna, that as the pandemic has been really, really hard, and we've been at this for over a year, but it was last year toward the end of the year that your organization, Project Pride SRQ, actually got a TV show going on. And it was just when people were feeling maybe a little depressed and scared and drawn in and were afraid of that invisible something else, right? That you got a conversation going. Tell me and tell us all how that started, how it's going, and what it's done for the LGBTQ plus community.
I will, Mercedes. And I want to just roll it backwards just a little bit. So, you know, I'm a mostly retired licensed mental health professional, and I've worked with children and youth for 20 plus years. And things that I learned in that arena, as well as working at Also Youth, I was the executive director there for 4.5 years. Things that I gathered along the way, and what mental health professionals have gathered along the way, is this idea of sanctuary, and that healing and growth and acceptance can only happen in a place that's safe, and not just a location that's safe. You know, a lot of people think, you know, if you have a child that's being mistreated, that you remove them from that space and that they'll be fine. But we know marginalized groups. So we have abused and neglected children, we have LGBT youth, we have LGBT adults that experience that every day as a marginalized group. So it's misunderstanding. Like when I worked with kids, it was really hard for my staff to get over the bad behaviors that they demonstrated that were really survival techniques, and to have them be able to look at them as somebody that was damaged or hurt. And I saw the most success with those who used equity, respect, diversity, acceptance, and then the healing started. So I think that those misperceptions, that fear, that misunderstanding can be impacted by making the other group or the other person seem real to you, and to make them have that like aha moment. Like today, we're all talking. I just met you in person. I don't know anything. I didn't know anything about you. And I might have had some thoughts or fears from the group you're attached to or where you're coming from and what are you going to ask me? And just having this relaxing conversation has put my guard down. It's going to allow me to really hear what you're saying and push away any other thoughts. So that's sort of what was behind the brunch show. And, a group of people, sat down and said, how can we represent ourselves into the community? How can we engage other members of the community in issues that are common to everyone? So we had this wonderful grant from the Community Foundation, and we started filming. And we reached out to members of the community all over the place. I mean, I have an extensive list of people from the arts, from medical, from dog shelters, from adoption agencies, to anyone and everyone that we could reach out and bring in and sit down. And our moderator was a fabulous Matthew McGee, an LGBT member community. And what he did was he talked about issues that are like, hey, that's the same problem I have with healthcare. That's the same problem I have with childcare. I'd love to do a seeing eye dog and train that. And we know, because of the number of people that viewed these videos time after time, and the comments that we got, that they meant something to people. And it just kind of, I think, brought down some people's guards to say, okay, that might be an LGBT person up there, that might be a drag queen up there, but they have the same issues that I have.
We really are all the same. And Kirsten mentioned that I published a book with a group of girlfriends, and it was a book about women. And after the book was published, we had a lot of women come to us and say, we want to be a part of your group. We really like what you're doing. And we actually put camps together for women, and hundreds and thousands actually of women participated in these camps. And what we learned is that women from all walks of life, from whatever ethnicity, who came to this camp, we were all the same. We all really just wanted the basic things. We wanted to feel safe. We wanted to be loved. We wanted to be happy. So at the end of the day, if we really get to know each other, we really will find that common ground. Jeannie, I don't want to leave you for last. I'm so grateful you're here. You have a big job, right? 53 acres, and include the entire community's perspective and understand what they're going to want to do when they get there, how they want to connect to nature, to each other. And it's a beautiful gift to our community. So how have you been engaging community, and what are people telling you to move forward?
Thanks, Mercedes. I love that you sort of segued using the words common ground, because that's how we think of this park, as a place where people can come together. So since 2013, so for the last 8 years or so, this is now the 174th presentation that's been given about the park. And I think we just added 54 participants. So now we're up to 12,541 participants that have participated in a listening session or a presentation, learned about the park. That's a lot of presentations and a lot of listening sessions. So that has been going on since the very beginning, because, if you're building a public park with taxpayer dollars and you're engaging your community, you want to make sure you're actually listening to people, and not just listening to them, not just asking questions and listening, but then actually applying that information, affecting the design and the build of the park, the activation of the programs. And so I think from the very beginning, one of the key elements of this project has been engaging the community and leveraging those voices. So this project has also conducted 3 pretty comprehensive surveys. The most recent one was since I've been here, so I'll speak to that one. And it's specifically about activation. So it was something we did this past summer. And just like you, Donna, we have some support from the Community Foundation to activate the park. And so over the next few years, we'll be kind of piloting a bunch of different programs and activities and events with the public to see what sticks. And from that survey that was conducted this past summer, we actually got 2,500 participants, which is pretty good for a 3-month survey. And more than what we've benchmarked at other park conservancies across the country. And we've kind of learned what the top 10 activities are that people want to do here at the park. And some of them are really simple and straightforward, like exactly what you would think, walking, biking, jogging, lots of yoga and meditation, but also, musical concerts and performances, outdoor theater. And so by going out and engaging the community in these listening sessions and also through surveys, which have been bilingual, they've been offered in a variety of platforms like online or social media, but also in person at the Newtown Farmers Market or the Downtown Farmers Market, the libraries, bilingually offered as well. Then we've been able to compile that input and then actually impact the building of the program and also even some of the design build elements for the park.
So I'd like to follow up on what you just mentioned about the surveys, because a lot of times the answer you get in a survey depends on the question you ask. Mm-hmm. So what kind of questions did you propose at first, and did the questions change as the surveys went on? In other words, what did you learn, and what would you not have known had you not gone through this process?
That's a great question. So yes, you're right. The questions that are presented, of course, impact the results. But then when you have, what I find really interesting with surveys is that open-ended part where people can write in their own questions and comments. And so through that, we did actually get some sort of different ideas, different features that people wanted, and different activities that people wanted that we didn't necessarily anticipate. So a couple of those features are a fishing pier. So that was really important. And a play space, which I guess one could sort of assume that, but it was, there were a lot of write-ins to make sure that there was a play space for children. And I will say, in terms of diversity and inclusion in this community, I think one of the most important things that kind of came out of the survey is, and I know this because I grew up here, and even people who move here can see this as a very segregated community, Sarasota. And so traditionally, for instance, the African-American community wasn't welcomed on the beaches. And so Newtown especially uses this park as their waterfront access and a place where they can watch sunsets and go cast a line to fish. So that came up in the surveys, make sure that you preserve that and you respect and honor that. So I think that's a really important thing to hear, and it was noted and taken into consideration.
Very quickly before I move on, you said that there were bilingual questions. Am I to assume the other language was Spanish?
Oh, yes.
What could have come out of that questionnaire?
So they were the same questions. They were just translated into Spanish. That way, we kind of had an apples and apples comparison. But we worked with Unidos Now, and they pushed the survey out, which was wonderful. And we got quite a lot of responses from their survey. But then we also had them in print, in Spanish, and in English at the libraries. We worked with all the libraries, and we got quite a lot that way as well. One of the things that we, learned from the Hispanic community was just the multi-generational aspect of park usage, making sure that there were always opportunities to, have a picnic, take a stroll, have, large families come together. And also the importance of offering things for free.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Jeannie, I'm going to go now to Michele. And Michele, I'd like you to kind of answer the same question. And I just want to add, first I want to know, through these webinars, what have you learned and how has it helped you evolve your mission? But I want to say that I participated, and I did say that earlier, I participated in at least 2 of these Zooms. And in one of them, it was right after the elections. And one of the participants said, Hispanics all voted for Trump. And so there weren't a lot of Hispanics in this panel listening and participating. And I think that's a really important issue that should be discussed between Hispanics and African Americans. So I think that it's wonderful that you were creating this space for that conversation. So what else has been learned, and what else has been aired out, and what has been the process of obtaining that information?
Well, the survey from last night is going to be very important. We have a professional group that does assessments and evaluations, and I've been working with them for the last 3 months talking about the surveys and input from our community. What I think has been the most important thing for me and for the board of Suncoast Black Arts Collaborative is observing that our arts and cultural organizations, leaders, were feeling a little hesitant at first in terms of coming to this forum to talk about a very sensitive issue. Any human issues are very sensitive. And what we learned through the surveys is that, and through their participation and follow-up conversation, is that it felt good, and our community felt good from the surveys in hearing the responses from leadership. And it's really people looking at understanding that conversation and dialogue is key to understanding human behaviors and human differences, and how we really all think alike. We might just think differently in different languages, but we all really think alike. And that's kind of been a reality. And you see those comments on the comment cards, on the survey cards. So for me, I am pleased that people, our community, is feeling comfortable in coming together. In fact, this last panel, which I started putting together months and months ago, back in July, the response from the leadership and from everyone was, oh, absolutely, I'd love to take part. Of course, there was a hesitancy, but they wanted to be involved in the conversation. And that's what's important. If we don't communicate and talk about these issues, then we're not going to learn. We're not going to come together. And part of a new initiative that I've put together is called Syllabus in Color, which has received significant funding from the Charles and Marjorie Baranczyk Foundation. And that is to specifically go into our underrepresented communities, African American, Jamaican, Haitian, and Latino and Hispanic communities, to talk to our families about the importance of the arts and engagement. So again, that dialogue, they hear it from the schools, but they need to also know that other people in our communities that look like them and that, have gone through life experiences. And we always look at history. History for African Americans is significant. That it is important that all children are involved in the arts in their life, not just in education, but in their lifestyle, in some form of the arts. So
and to see themselves represented, right?
Yes,
have their life
absolutely.
experience represented, not just an artist on screen or on the stage, but also the writer, also the creator, also the person that brings the stories from the community and showcases the stories.
Right.
Thank you, Michele. We're going to go on to Donna, and Donna, talk about those TV shows, right? I watched a couple of them, And your first show and your first guest was a representative from CAN Community Health Services, and to talk about HIV at the time where pandemic has really, like I said earlier, brought people indoor and shuttered and the veils closing. It was such an important conversation to have. What has been the outcome of these shows, and how are people feeling about them?
The response has been positive as far as what people have said, and a wide variety of comments about a couple of things. It's very important to us to make sure that the audience knows who we are as Project Pride, but also who it was that helped us create the show and get the show off the ground. So there's messages in every single step of the way. So, acknowledging those sponsors, acknowledging the grant is a message to any LGBTQ person or any person that watched it, was that this was of enough importance that members of our community stepped up and helped us do this. Then having people who, like, Michele was saying, people that looked like them, that talked like them, that had similar lifestyle, whether it was LGBTQ or not, made it feel very inclusionary, and the messages of acceptance came through. And then the fact that people got to learn things that maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't know about CAN. Maybe they've never heard from someone from Moat Marine or from Selby Gardens. They maybe never knew about some of the restaurants in town. And each one of those messages just keep on, I think of it as like, when you drop a drop of water in a puddle and it starts rippling out, that's what's happening, is that, they're seeing themselves as part of a larger community. So when you do that with people, I find that then they want more. So more on a bunch of different levels, like more of the shows. So they want to see more shows and more people in the community, and we have to talk about that. They also say, well, if you can do that, then where else can we see ourselves included? And Project Pride, has taken those steps to do some of those things. We have a gorgeous street mural down on the corner of Coconut by the library, that we got a professional artist to come and paint what is called the Progress Pride flag. And it's actually visible from the sky. So if you're flying into Sarasota and you come in that way, you can see it. There's that first message that Sarasota is an accepting city. So, Project Pride is taking in all that information about the brunch shows and the comments from the brunch shows, and trying to figure out, do we need to change the format? Do we need to be the man on the street? Maybe. We've got a lot of really cool ideas. But most significant was that happiness that people had about seeing themselves, seeing someone like themselves on the screen.
Well, I felt happiness, honestly, when I saw the Project Pride parade downtown. Yes. I was very happy. I'm new to Sarasota. I've only been here for 2 years, and it's a beautiful community. But I was excited to see the happiness of people just parading downtown and expressing themselves and showing their joy. So to kind of wrap it up, I'm going to stay with you, Donna, and ask you, how can we as a community be more inclusive? What do we do? What do we do to be more inclusive towards the diverse, the creative, the positive, the productive people who are people that will probably be our friends if we just get to know them?
Well, I talk a little bit personally about my journey here with Project Pride. We do a lot of brainstorming as a board, and we're like, okay, we're going to reach out to this particular group or this particular entity and ask them to partner with us to do something. And I know that, I either thought it to myself or maybe verbalized it to the group that, I don't know about that group. I'm worried that we're going to get disappointed or they're going to reject us. And how's that going to feel? Should we really approach them? They've never been helpful in the past. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have my own unconscious bias about, let's say, the police department or the governing people of the city. Because I've lived here for 8 years. I've been a member of the LGBT community all that time. I participated in a lot of things, but I wasn't ever seeing any of those signs or those reflections of my community in public until this year. And so I think that people really need to uncover those biases, and say, okay, I am guilty of that, and I probably have other ones. So there's a lot of self-reflection that needs to happen. I think that when you're trying to, engage the community, and maybe you have a checkoff list. Do we have all the white people, the Black people, Latino people? Do we have young people, old people? And, I'm going to come from my point of view. Do you have LGBTQ plus on that list? Have you invited them to your panel? Have you invited them to your street parade? Part of what Project Pride is doing is actually going out and doing things like that. We've done baby clothes drives and food drives in Newtown. So, and the other thing that I also learned was that, you can assume that in a town like Sarasota, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations. And you can imagine that, and you mentioned silos earlier, and that, there's silos around. And I know that's happened. But one of the pleasant things that happened is that when we did get over our bias and we went out to the community and asked them to participate, the overwhelming response was yes. And so you got to go out there. You got to go out on a limb. You got to get past those biases. I'm not asking you to accept my lifestyle or change your lifestyle. We're just asking, like all the other groups represented here today, is to just have some respect and inclusion.
And
so it's work.
accept all of our humanities. Jeannie, same question for you. How do we go about including more diverse voices into the conversations we're having to move our community forward?
Well, I think there's some really basic things that, lots of people do, whether it's, sharing information, opening up your doors and inviting people in, putting surveys out there, that kind of thing. But I think in the end, it kind of comes down to humility and curiosity, and being curious about who's out there and what's out there and not judging them because you don't know them. I think that's super important. And one of my favorite leaders is Brene Brown, and she says, "I'm here to get it right, not to be right." And I think that is just humility in a nutshell. So I think when it comes to listening to diverse voices, we really, you need to like hang your ego up and just open your mind and open your eyes and your heart. And I think also, the 2020 census just came out. I know I shared that with you guys the other day, and I think it's really important, to look at those demographics because, as a person who grew up here in Sarasota, and I think I told you my children are 4th generation, we've been here for a long time. This community is changing. It's changed a lot. And if you need proof of it, look at the census information from 2010 to 2020. And you'll see, evidence of that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And Michele, I left you for last on purpose. I come from a matriarchal community and family, and I believe in our elders being able to share wisdom. So I defer to you to share that wisdom with us at this point. What do we do? How do we move forward? How do we tear down walls and bridges and extend our hands to diversity and inclusion?
Well, that's interesting. the one thing that the African American community will always ask, why doesn't the opposite race come to us? And I've heard this a lot since I moved here, and it's something that I've heard, for years. As an example, why not perhaps set up an art center, a contemporary dance center in Newtown? Part of what we are seeing in our country is a lack of exposure. And that's why the syllabus of color is so important. It's engaging people in exposures to the arts. If we can go into diverse communities and perform and create some of the arts, it's an opportunity to open an awareness of opportunity for those groups, those cultures to know, hey, this is great. Let me do more. I think Donna kind of approached that in some of the things that she was saying. So it's a give and take. It's not just bringing diverse cultures to our downtown organizations, but our organizations coming into the communities and developing programs. I think that's significant. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'd like to think, some of the organizations that exist in Newtown and in some of the growing cultures, our Jamaican and Haitian cultures, are going to have an opportunity to, through our conversations, through our forums, to get our arts and cultural organizations to come in and learn about what goes on in those communities. So that's kind of what I've heard. The most. I have to tell you an interesting thing. This was many years ago when my children were very young, my daughter, and we were living way up in the hills of New Jersey. And my husband and I would talk all the time. Our children aren't exposed to African-American cultures. And I would drive in every Saturday into New York City to take them to the Dance Theater of Harlem, just for that exposure. And I used to always say, gosh, why isn't that in my New Jersey community? So I reflect on what I'm hearing now as to what these communities would like to see as my own experiences, in raising my own children and families. So that I think is important.
I just want to say, gracias, mujeres valiosas. Thank you, valuable women. It's been my honor to moderate this panel. Thank you so much. And I'm now going to turn it back to Kirsten.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Mercedes, for leading us in such a great discussion. And thanks to each of our panelists. We do have a few questions that I'd like to share. I'm going to pick up, Michele, right where you left off. You've talked about wanting to, what you wanted to do with your children and bring to your children. Some people on this call this morning probably were at the great event you had last night. I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to be there. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you bring our young learners into the great conversations that you're having about arts and racial justice, and thinking about the great panels that you have led up to this point. Is this information that our youth have access to? And if so, how? And what do you foresee in the future doing in terms of the events that you hold that you would open to our youth?
Right. Yes, it was actually, I think we were all quite moved last night by the comments of our 4 young panelists. so articulate in terms of understanding where they are in their life cycle. Those were panelists, that I have been working with over the past year, and understanding that, helping them to understand that what they have to say and where they are in their life cycle needs to continue in conversations with other young people. So a part of the work that we are going to be doing is expanding that. Worked very hard last night to try to get more young audience to come, and I do believe that we had a significant number of students, but students need to be involved in that conversation. And that's part of, education for Suncoast Black Arts Collaborative is significant. And it's significant because that's our future. And, we need to hear those voices. So the young people who were on the panel last night, they have made a commitment that they're going to be coming into the schools with me, that we're going to be doing things with organizations within underrepresented communities, so that those organizations can hear the voices of younger people. And they have a lot to say, as we witnessed last night, good and bad. But the good always leads to the positive. The critical issues always lead to positive movement. And that's what these conversations, I think, are doing.
Thank you, Michele. And you are right. They were very articulate last night. And I believe that the session was recorded and will be available for anyone who missed it.
Yes.
And I highly recommend that they watch it. Switching now to the Bay, and Jeannie, it's almost impossible to think about the Bayfront without thinking about sustainability. Can you tell us a little bit, as we think about the natural assets that are top of mind, what steps are being taken and voices being heard by the Bay to ensure that this 53-acre park is being developed sustainably?
So sustainability is one of the guiding principles of the Bay project in terms of environmental sustainability, also financial sustainability. But what's happening is that as the park is getting designed and built, technology is sort of answering questions we didn't even know we had necessarily. So that's just the way it goes sometimes, isn't it? And so sometimes we say as many resources are being spent underground as are being spent above ground for this park. So if you were to look at the current condition of the property, the 53 acres, it's about 70% hardscape between parking lots and rooftops. And what that equates to is about 75 million gallons of stormwater runoff that comes across 41 from downtown and Rosemary across the landscape here and dumps into the Bay without being treated. And so as that has become, that reality kind of sunk in during the design and planning portion of the project, certain actually very low tech options came out as sort of necessary elements of the project. So we have a really robust stormwater treatment system in place underground. And what's happening is basically every drop of water that comes across this property from rain events and other stormwater is going to get treated before it goes out into the Bay. And in terms of diversity, I would say that is, to preserve biodiversity in all its forms. And so, we want to make sure, of course, that everyone in our community has access to the waterfront and the incredible amount of biodiversity that is a part of this beautiful community, which is why we all choose to live here. That all the critters that call this area home. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of biodiversity in the form of birds and fish and crustaceans. And most of the plants that we're using a native plant palette and a Florida friendly palette. So, you know, for instance, tomorrow morning we're starting a new program, which is called Walking in Wonder. And we're working with Around the Bend Nature Tours. And every Wednesday morning at 9 and 10 o'clock, people can meet at the Blue Pagoda, which is our base camp here, and go on a nature walk. And you'll go with a certified environmental guide who will tell you about the birds that you're seeing and the plants that you're seeing and all of the hard work that these various water treatment systems are doing. And we want this to be a demonstration site and to be kind of a beacon and example to the community for what's called low impact development. And that really should be an equitable and reachable goal for all of us in this community. And so biodiversity in all its forms, trying to honor that and make sure that this is a great place for everybody to come.
That is wonderful. And it certainly is. The work that you're doing and the opportunities that you're presenting to our community are really bringing our community closer and also raising so much awareness about the great opportunity we have from a sustainability standpoint as we do bring together this culture of belonging in our community. And Donna, this is just such an amazing time for you and Project Pride with the brunch show. So you are reaching your first anniversary. What is the show's future and what's in store next for Project Pride SRQ in the digital programming world?
You know, I don't have a solid answer for you because we are just wrapping up. Although we've been collecting the information, the feedback that we've been getting, we are poised to have a really good sit down with everybody that produced it and the board members with all the information that we've gathered to discuss if that's the same way to go or if we need to change up the format. And of course, you know, part of that conversation will be held with the Community Foundation because we're also interested to know from their point of view, you know, what kind of feedback did they get, if any? So we do plan on putting that all information together and making some decisions moving forward. We do have some other digital platforms that will come back online for the community. We have a whole history timeline. We have some transgender support people that we're doing a program. So we're going to be looking at those types of digital things to bring back and to revisit for the future.
Do you see opportunities for our youth to get involved in what you're doing or opportunities for your programming to reach more of our younger audiences?
That's a really good question. You know, I learned a long time ago that you cannot be all things to all people because then you dilute your efforts. And one of the parts of the mission of Project Pride is to become a link of sorts to members of the community. We don't want to step on anyone's toes. We don't want to replicate what's possibly going on out there that's working well, but we want to support them. And, you know, anyone that has known me, you know, also youth is a real passion of mine. I'm a volunteer still. They're doing pretty well at this point, but we know the history of the struggle there. So we want to support them to do what they do best. We want to support, you know, second chance, last opportunity. We want to give support, whether it's financially or in volunteer terms, to all the places that are doing a good job. We won't specifically be offering programs or services, but we will be offering really some blood, sweat, and tears and some money to those people that are already doing some really great work out there.
Thank you, Donna. And what a great way to wrap up the session. I think one of the themes we see in all the work going on here is how collaborative and woven together the work that each of you do individually and as part of your organizations to really help create a culture of belonging in Sarasota. It is so important that everyone have a place, a platform, and an opportunity to share their voice and to hear from other perspectives. Diversity is really at the core of so many of the great offerings in Sarasota. And we are just so honored to have all of you open up this conversation to the wider community, to be with us and take this hour out of your day. For those of you who joined us this morning, thank you for being here. On behalf of our board and our CEO, Roxy Jerdy, it is just an honor to be able to present these amazing panelists to each of you. To our panelists and to Mercedes, thank you for taking the time to prepare for this session today. Thank you for the great work that you're doing. And we look forward to hopefully seeing all of you in person soon, but certainly on more virtual platforms to come. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.